Hi bookkeepers and accountants. In this video, I'm going to give you a quick demonstration of 3 new bookkeeping rules we've just released. These 3 rules are inconsistent sales tax by customer, inconsistent sales tax by vendor, and inconsistent expense account by vendor. Before we get started, one of the most important things to remember in using this rule is that how these rules work is they group transactions by customers and vendors and then perform a series of checks, which I'm going to run through in this demonstration. But a key aspect of this check is that the transactions have to have a vendor or customer assigned to them. So if you are going to use these rules, I highly recommend that you also enable transactions missing vendor or customer information so that any transactions are also reviewed by these 3 rules, because they'll have vendors and customers assigned to them. And if they don't, you'll become aware of those. You could assign them and they'll be later checked by these 3 rules. All right. So in terms of what I'm going to be covering in this demonstration, there's 2 main aspects. I'm going to be running through the custom scan tool, how to perform a custom scan with these 3 rules. And then on top of that, I'm also going to run through a quick bookkeeping alert. So an email that was generated notifying me of inconsistent sales taxes as well as inconsistent expense account coding by vendor. So the primary benefit of these 3 rules are they reduce the number of sales tax errors that are in your bookkeeping files, as well as just improve the overall accuracy, because now transactions with vendors are consistently being coded to certain expense accounts, and those include cost of sales as well as your other expense and expense accounts in QuickBooks Online. Okay, so with that in mind, let's dive into the custom scan tool first. So I'm going to navigate to custom scan here. And I'm going to select, let's look at January 2025. I'm going to be looking to run these rules against any transactions with a reporting date that falls on that time. I'm just going to double check the rules that I've enabled. I have transactions missing with vendor customer information. I have my inconsistency rules and my inconsistent expense account rules. Some recommendations here: if you are going to be running these reports for let's just say a quarter, and you've got a lot of transactions, you might want to run separate reports for each of these so that the report isn't too long. That way it just becomes a bit more manageable, because if you have a lot of transactions in a large reporting period, whether that's a quarter or a year, that's a lot of data, and the report can be quite large if you have all 3 of these rules turned on. So I'm going to click done. I'm going to click start scan. And now what Level's going to do is going to look at my QuickBooks Online file for all transactions in January 2025. And it's going to generate some information that's going to be really helpful in identifying sales tax errors as well as account coding errors within vendors. All right, so here we go. So if we move down, we'll see here the first thing that comes up is inconsistent sales tax by customer. Now there's some helpful information here. As I mentioned before, what this warning is telling you is that transactions missing a vendor or customer information isn't included in this report, so you'll want to enable that alert or run that report with this report. Also some helpful information for Canadian clients. Where a sales tax code is out of scope, that means the transaction will not be included in your QuickBooks Online sales tax report. So if you do want to include that transaction in your sales tax report, and it is a 0% sales tax, you might want to include something like 0 rated or exempt, depending on the situation. So what Level has done is it's identified potential inconsistencies within this reporting period. So Level's looked at January, looked at what customers were active during that period, and then compared those transactions to historic transactions. And it goes back about 13 months. So it's looking at 13 months worth of transactions and seeing whether the transactions in January are consistent with those in the past. So what we can see here is that Historically, most transactions have been posted to HST Ontario, that sales tax code, whereas one transaction in the current reporting period has been posted to GST. And if I toggle down any of these arrows, it will actually show me the transaction. And if I click on this and I'm logged into QuickBooks Online at that time, it's actually going to bring me to that transaction. So let's give it a second while it loads. And here we can see that transaction, and we can see that the incorrect sales tax code has been applied, and we can quite easily just come in here and change this to HST, click save. And if I rerun this scan, this will all be grouped into HST Ontario. So that's how we've fixed that error. And now let's move on to the inconsistent sales tax by vendor. The same warnings apply and same information is provided. But here we can see that expected enterprises had out of scope sales tax historically applied to it. And that I could go through the same process. I would click on this transaction. It would open up in QuickBooks Online. And what we'll see is that this overall expense has actually been treated as out of scope. So I actually need to change this to exclusive of sales tax or inclusive of sales tax. In this case, it looks like it's inclusive. So here we go. I'm going to put 13% on there. And here I've actually just applied an input sales tax credit of $3,900, potentially saving the business $3,900 by identifying this mistake, right? Click save. And now if I rerun this report, which I'll do at the end, you'll see that these issues are no longer there. And just to highlight again, Level's going to look at active vendors in January. So that's only that is only vendors that had transactions in January will be included in this report, right? So if you want a larger reporting period or a larger review, you would just increase the transaction dates that you're looking at. And then moving down further, we're going to see inconsistent expense account by vendor. Here we can see that expected enterprises actually was coded to direct subcontractors as opposed to materials, which it has historically been coded to. So the same applies. I could open this up again. I'm going to change this to materials. It's going to change my sales tax to blank. I just need to make sure that I save that again. Click save, close. And now when I go to new scan and I rerun the scan, what I can see that all the transactions are consistent now. So everything is 100%, which is what I want, which is what I'm looking for. And now I'm confident that at least for January, my transactions from a sales tax and an expense account coding perspective are accurate. Some other helpful tips about this tool is it also does look at non-posting transactions. So we'll also look at the sales tax and account codes to estimates as well as purchase orders. And it also looks at it on a line-by-line basis. So to see an example of that, I could come down here and I can actually see, for example, here's those purchase orders. And then also, if I look, let's just say I want to go look at the customer predictable producer. Here, these are the same invoice, but there are two individual lines on that invoice. That's why you're seeing it populate twice, is because two lines attached to that invoice have the HST on it. So here you can actually see that. All right, so that is how the custom scan tool works. Now, the bookkeeping alert works slightly different, but the same premise still applies. So here is an example of that. So as usual, the report is broken down into the sections of the rules. Most of the information that you read here is the same as the custom scan tool, except for the sensitivity threshold in what's defined as a potential error. So Level uses an 80-20 rule. If you read through this, what it's saying is that the following transactions use a tax code that has been applied less than 20% of the time for these customers. So if we were to scroll down here, what's happening is there was a transaction posted to Predictable Patricia by Level Accounting for $50,000 using a sales tax code of GST. And if we continue reading, it says the above discrepancy is inconsistent with other sales transactions posted to Predictable Patricia over the review period from December 15th to January 15th, 2025. So here you're looking at that 13-month window again. And what Level's also doing is it's going to provide you a summary of those the sales transactions associated with Predictable Patricia, excluding those above. So historically, all transactions, excluding this one, have been posted to HST and none have been posted to GST. This is the first transaction posted to GST and looks like a potential error. And as with all other email alerts, you can click on this hyperlink and it will open the transaction up in QuickBooks as long as you're logged into it. And the same applies with the other rules, right? The inconsistent sales tax by vendor. So here we can see that out of scope transaction. Out of scope has never been used historically. And then at the same time, the expense account by vendor. Here we can see that direct subcontractors was used, and historically it's never been used. So here you're getting notification within 24 hours that a potential mistake has been made, and that's based on an 80-20 rule in that Level will check if that transaction has been used at least, or the sales tax code or the account code on that transaction has been used at least 20% of the time. And if it hasn't, if it's less, it will notify you of that potential error so you can fix it. All right, so that's it. If you have any questions or feedback, please feel free to reach out to us at support@checkthelevel.com. And as always, happy bookkeeping. From the team at Level, cheers.